Welcome to Air Force One Pavilion at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. I'm Janet Tran, and I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Learning Officer here at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. And it's our tradition here in our namesake's honor that we start every event with the Pledge of Allegiance, so I'll ask that you please rise and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and please be seated. So before we launch into our much anticipated round of the Great Communicator Debates National Championship, I hope that you'll indulge me in expressing thanks to the numerous individuals and organizations that have brought this event to fruition. The road to the finals of the Great Communicator Debates has been long and hard for our debaters. Tonight it's not just an isolated incident. It is instead a representative of numerous regional competitions that have taken place both online, in person, ranging from Long Island, New York to Sherman Oaks, California, and all points in between. And we're so happy that we have brought together these debaters. It's often quoted that life is a journey and not a destination, but for our debaters this weekend, I think this place might count as a destination as well. So it's due to the remarkable dedication of people all over the country that we've been able to provide this platform for over a decade to great debaters such as yourself. So let's kick off tonight's proceedings with gratitude. First, I'm going to thank people who did not have the chance to make it here, but still contributed to the regional competitions. We have Christina Tallingan of Notre Dame High School in Los Angeles, Amberly Farrell Tanner of Steele Early College High School in Texas, Brother Stephen Boletta of Chaminade High School, and Dr. Andy Parson at Long Island University in New York, Shannon Costello at Collegiate School in Virginia, and Chris Igawa of Southridge High School in Oregon. Thank you for your contributions if you're watching online. And in person, if you wouldn't mind standing when I recognize you, and remain standing for some recognition, collective recognition, because you'll deserve it. First, I would love to recognize Dr. Ben Voth, who joins us from Southern Methodist University in Texas. He came to speak to our debaters yesterday and shared a lot from his presidential studies. Thank you for remaining standing. Next, I'd love to recognize Philip Helt of Rockhurst High School in Missouri. Thank you. And lastly, once again, want to extend our gratitude to our tab room guru, Dino Pape. Wherever you are, please stand. You know he's been invaluable today, making sure that we have our rounds and everything is fair and well. All right, so help me extend our warm thanks to everyone involved making this event possible. This includes our regional partners, contributors, students, coaches, parents, and our incredible education team here at the Reagan Foundation. And a shout out to Chris Adams running around wherever you are. Let's give another round of applause. We are, of course, deeply grateful to our sponsors, partners, and supporters that help us follow our North Star. In President Reagan's farewell address, which my colleagues have heard me quote ad nauseum, he calls for an informed patriotism. And that is the North Star that we chase relentlessly here. So it is thanks to the support of people like the Sumner's Foundation and Winsong Trust for their dedication and belief in that education mission that we can make this possible. And to our presenting sponsor, the Conrad and Hilton Foundation, who has generously gifted us a $1 million endowment, securing scholarships for the Great Communicator Debate Series for years to come. Every student competing here will walk away with at least $1,500 prize money for scholarships for college because of this gift, and many more talented debaters in the future. This commitment allows us to achieve our goal of educating and empowering you the next generation and the leaders of tomorrow. And for me, I know we can't express our gratitude and enough for your steadfast support and partnership. So, gratitude done, out of the way. I want to make sure those of you who are joining us online or in our audience who might not be as familiar with the Great Communicator debate series, please allow me to share a bit about the competition. So first, about our namesake, the 40th president, the Great Communicator himself, who our competitors have learned a lot about this weekend, though they've also quoted him a ton as well, so they might be experts. But they came here this weekend to the Reagan Library with their families and their coaches, because this is more than a competition. This was actually a retreat weekend, and we all broke bread together. We got to know each other. We got to laugh together even. And it's a part of our theory of change here that supports free ideas, civil discourse, civility, and more. And we can't take credit for thinking this up because it goes to our namesake again. President Reagan said, "I've always believed a lot of the trouble in the world would disappear if we were talking to each other instead of about each other." And President Reagan did reach out to talk to people across difference. He worked 8 years with the Democratic Congress, and he spoke to House Speaker Tip O'Neill. And together, they served the American people. During the height of the Cold War, he reached out and negotiated beyond the Iron Curtain, and he spoke to General Secretary Gorbachev to remove the threat of nuclear war in our time. So debaters, I know it's not that dramatic, but I hope during this retreat and competition that you experience in a small way this bridging amidst competition, that there can be understanding, that there can be civility, and yes, there can even be friendship after the competition is done. So after all, I want to emphasize again, every student here is a winner. And I'm not saying that like everyone gets a trophy type winner. I'm being quite literal. Everyone is here because they were a finalist and a winner at their regional competition and brought incredible talent and perseverance to the table. So after months of intense competition with hundreds of students and regional qualifiers, we've gathered 16 of the most talented speech and debate students nationwide, and we've reached the end of the road. We now have our final 2 contestants who will compete for $10,000 scholarship and the title of the Next Great Communicator. They will compete here under the wings of Air Force One at the Reagan Library, the location of actual past presidential primary debates, and I'm sure many more in the future. Our great communicators rise to and above the presidential caliber, in my opinion. They answer the prompt, they don't deflect, even more, they avoid personal attacks, and we've never, as far as I know, had to enact a mute policy. So I think we're doing pretty well. So for our audiences, in case you haven't made the distinction already, our competition differs a lot from the presidential televised debates that you've seen. And for our rhetoric wonks and debate nerds out there, it certainly differs from the academic debate styles that you've seen as well. And that's because of our mission here. The heart of our mission at the education team at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute, we seek to cultivate informed, educated, conscientious citizens and leaders. And debate, we believe, at its core, is an avenue to foster curiosity, to help us be critical thinkers, and yes, to be open to new ideas, even uncomfortable ideas, when presented with evidence. So to ensure our democracy prevails for your generation, we need to be able to have better and good faith arguments about controversial issues. The optimism of our 40th president and evidence from this competition makes me believe we can achieve those better arguments. And debaters, we can do that, can't we? Thanks for nodding, I appreciate that. All right, now to the competition. First, let's delve into the subject matter that our students will be debating tonight. They are primed and ready to argue both sides of tonight's resolution. Here it is. Resolved. Advances in generative artificial intelligence pose a threat to independent thought. To be impartial, we carried out a coin toss just a few moments ago to determine which side each student will represent. This is not their own personal view. Now, whether you're an official judge lined up right here, or you're a spectator trying to gauge who the winner is from your seat in the pavilion or from your computer screen, I'm going to ask you to momentarily set aside your personal opinion on the matter as well. Instead, focus on how the argument is crafted, articulated, because unlike politicians who advocate viewpoints for political gains, our students are arguing persuasively to convince you of their stance. And I ask you to look out at this critical aspect because tonight, you will actually play a significant role in deciding our national champion as well. You'll have the opportunity to cast your vote using your smartphone as part of the audience vote. So please stay tuned after the final round for instructions on how to participate in this exciting segment of our event. All right. I'm still building up the sort of tension here. So before I introduce to you two finalists, suspense, I want to introduce our final round judging panel. So in addition to you, the audience, we are truly privileged to have the following judges for the championship round of the Great Communicator debates. All right. Dr. Ben Both is an academic expert in debate, argumentation, communication, public speaking, and rhetoric at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. He researches and teaches with the goal of equipping individuals to have a voice in the world. Dr. Voth's unique approach to communication emphasizes the role of free speech, dissent, and argument in preventing and reversing problems of human injustice. Specializing in rhetorical studies approach allows him to teach a myriad of communications courses at the undergraduate and graduate level. As Director of Speech and Debate at SMU, Dr. Voth has coached more than 25 national and international champions of collegiate speech and debate events. All right, Mr. James Galbraith. Can we have some applause? I appreciate the okay. Before I go on to James, thank you. I appreciate that. Dr. James R. Galbraith, formerly Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs for Hilton Hotels Corporation, has a professional background in news, government, and corporate affairs. From 1960 to 76, he held a variety of positions in Washington, D.C., including service as an administrative assistant to a U.S. congressman, an executive with a congressional committee, a national magazine editor, a broadcast correspondent, and as executive director of the Republican Governors Association. Along with President Clinton and other national leaders, Mr. Galbraith was awarded an Ellis Island Medal of Honor in 1993. A native of Michigan, Mr. Galbraith is a graduate of California State University, Los Angeles, and we are honored to have him as a Ronald Reagan Foundation member. All right, thank you. Thank you, Jim. My colleague, Ms. Rachel Hoff, is the policy director at the Ronald Reagan Institute in Washington, D.C., and launched the Institute's Center for Freedom and Democracy in 2021. The center holds a special place for Ms. Hoff, as her earliest political memory was the fall of the Berlin Wall, emblematic of President Reagan's legacy. Ms. Hoff's diverse experience includes serving as a speechwriter for Senator John McCain, a legislative assistant for Congressman Mac Thornberry, and co-founding the Foreign Policy Initiative. A two-time Washington delegate to the Republican National Convention, Ms. Hoff now teaches at the University of Texas at Austin's LBJ School of Public Affairs, where she earned her master's in global policy studies. She also holds a bachelor's in political science from Tufts University. Give it up. All right. Dr. Michael Cusimano is the managing director of the Cusimano Real Estate Group, a premier company in real estate development and investment in Los Angeles region for over 40 years, having developed some of the most noteworthy projects in the region. Dr. Cusimano is also an adjunct business professor at Pepperdine University's Business School. Dr. Cusimano is also an active philanthropist and a board member for more than a dozen community organizations, including his role as the chair of the Board of Governors of the Providence St. Joseph Foundation, and has been an active benefactor for Providence for decades, most recently supporting the construction of the Cusimano Family Urgent Care Center, which is set to open in 2023. Round of applause. Mr. Eric Lindberg is the Vice President, Chief Investment Officer, and Trustee of the Austin E. Knowlton Foundation in Dallas, Texas. The Knowlton Foundation is the legacy of Austin E. Knowlton, who, like President Reagan, had the nickname of Dutch. He was a community leader, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. The foundation's primary mission is to promote and advance higher education in the United States through direct grants and contributions to qualified colleges and universities, and they have an incredible network of schools. Mr. Lindberg continues to support students in higher education in the way Mr. Knowlton intended. Round of applause. Miss Aaliyah Tudor is the president of the Aaliyah Tudor Family Foundation. Ms. Tudor is committed to building on her family's distinguished legacy of philanthropy. She serves on the President's Council at the University of Southern California and is an inaugural member of the Keck Medicine of USC Board of Counselors. She established the Aaliyah Tudor Chair in Reproductive Medicine at the Keck School of Medicine of the University of Southern California and serves on the Board of Directors for the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. In addition, Ms. Tudor serves on the Children's Hospital Foundation Board of Trustees, where she endowed the Global Online Pediatric Subspecialty Training Program, and also served as the co-chair of the hospital's Government Relations Committee. At Columbia Law School, Ms. Tudor is a member of the Dean's Council, and in 2020 endowed the Sidney Feltenstein 26 Scholarship Fund. Finally, Mr. John O'Hurley is an American actor, comedian, author, game show host, and television personality. He is known for his portrayal of Jay Peterman on the NBC sitcom Seinfeld. You younger folks, you'll catch up. And was the sixth host of the game show Family Feud from 2006 to 2010. Mr. O'Hurley has portrayed many voice acting roles, including the original King Neptune on SpongeBob SquarePants, and he is currently the co-host of the AKC National Dog Show, which airs on NBC each Thanksgiving. Round of applause, the biggest one. All right, so this is the moment we've been waiting for. Regional competitions, 16 debaters here, competitions throughout the day, this weekend. Let's meet our finalists. So as I announce your name, please join me on stage and take your seat. On the affirmative side of the topic, we have Shrisha Raj. Shrisha is a champion debater, a future policy analyst, and an academic achiever hailing from Virginia. A recent graduate from Broad Run High School, Shrisha is set to begin her college studies at the University of California, Berkeley campus, where she will delve into the field of statistics and public policy this fall. Shrisha has over half a decade of devotion to the art of speech and debate, and her remarkable talents saw her rise to become Virginia's Lincoln Douglas debate state champion in 2021. She has since been honored by the National Speech and Debate Association with the prestigious Academic All-American recognition. Thank you. On the negative side, we have Sahil Sood. Sahil is a distinguished alumnus of Lambert High School in Suwanee, Georgia. Sahil will be attending Harvard University this fall, where he will study cell and molecular biology, as well as computer science, so illustrating a harmonious blend of life science and technology. Sahil's journey to our Circle of Achievers traces back to his triumphant performance at our online Pacific Northwest competition. And this is his second year being a Great Communicator national finalist, so for those of you who have another chance, please try again. His 7-year-long passion for public forum debate has not only shaped his intellectual curiosity, but also secured him a coveted #1 national ranking by the National Speech and Debate Association. Sahil is also a recipient of the prestigious Coca-Cola Scholar Award, as well as a U.S. Presidential Scholar. And so, the stage is set, the players are at their board, and we are ready to listen with open minds and open hearts. Debaters, the floor is yours. Best of luck to you both.
Gotta lower the mic a little bit. Before I begin, I'd like to extend a few thank yous. First of all, thank you to each and every one of you for being here today. I don't know what exactly brought you here, what made you interested, but you're here today, and that's what matters. Today, this moment right here is going to be my last debate. Of course, I'll engage in debates and conversations and discussions throughout my whole life, but on this stage right now, I'm taking it in. My first thank you is obviously to my mom. Thank you for quite literally making me, but also thank you for raising me into the young woman that I am today. A bit about my mom is that she was actually a newsreader back in India. And so I'd like to think that I get a little bit of her charm. And as for my dad, well, he did IT. So I guess that qualifies him for this job. Thank you to my friends, my loved ones, and anyone else that have supported me, my speech and debate team at Broad Run, which I've been a proud member of for 5 years, and my coach, Jim Dunning, for always being there for me, for helping me every step of the way. And thank you to the debaters that were here today. It was truly a pleasure to talk to each one of you, and I am so blessed and so thankful and so inspired by every single one of you. So thank you for that. of course, I can't end these thank yous without thanking the Ronald Reagan Institute for hosting this event, for preserving the values of liberty, democracy, and justice. Right. Let's begin. Quote, in March, an AI-generated image of the Pentagon being bombed caused brief stock market dips and a statement from the Department of Defense, end quote. Quote, Russia's Vladimir Putin has similarly doubled down on AI-enabled propaganda in the wake of his Ukraine invasion, including a deep-fake video of the Ukrainian President Zelensky calling for Ukrainians to surrender. And possibly, most dauntingly, generative AI has convinced my brother that he's an artist, just that now his brushstrokes are 2-second keystrokes. Pablo Picasso is turning in his grave. That's why I affirm today's resolution: advances in generative artificial intelligence pose a threat to independent thought. But before I continue any further, let's clarify what this debate is not about. It's not about whether AI is good or bad, fallible or infallible. It's not even about how similar or different AI is to humans. At the core, this debate is assessing whether there is a risk to our confidence, the confidence to rely on ourselves as sources of judgment, the confidence to draw from our own experiences in times of conflict, as opposed to going to a machine. After all, it is the cornerstone of democracy, independent thought. We see this threat manifest in two key ways. First, AI has lowered the threshold to entry, jeopardizing our need, or frankly want, to exercise independent thought. This makes it easy to lose sight of the process and rather trading it for the product. Let's take a simple example: writing. Instead of focusing on finding your voice and developing your craft through the mundane hours of brainstorming, now, with the click of a button, you have just that. But does that make you a writer? Is it the product that makes you an artist, or is it the process? The same attitude is now multiplied with countries of economic interest to the point of where we lose sight of our neighbors, seeing them as means to an end rather than complicated, intricate individuals within themselves. And this is what Ronald Reagan was most coveted for, is that as a president, he not only led the country, but he did it while seeing every single one of us eye to eye. Gillespie 23 conducted a global study on trust and reliance on AI, showing that there is higher trust in AI's products, almost 75%, in countries that have an increasingly important role in emerging technologies, such as Brazil, India, China, and more. What this means is that these countries actually go to the machine first, generative AI after, and then they go to humans. This places AI on a moral high ground, diminishing our trust in our own decisions and rather turning generative AI as our first point of contact. But this is dangerous. As Michael Sandel, professor of Harvard, articulates, AI not only replicates biases, but it confers on these biases as a kind of scientific credibility. The second key threat is that generative AI has given technology that can help spread government-sponsored propaganda at a scale never known before, effectively inhibiting civilians' ability to think for themselves. As Drexel and Withers from The Hill write, quote, China's Xi Jinping ordered his party state to leverage AI to comprehensively increase the ability of the Chinese Communist Party to mold Chinese public opinion. Further advancements in generative AI, such as deepfakes, are nearly indistinguishable from genuine photos, audios, video. The Center for New American Security puts it best. Generative AI is poised to be the free world's next greatest gift to authoritarians. Unfortunately, this unprecedented scale of propaganda is empowered by generative AI, leaving citizens no choice but to lean on the confidence of AI rather than their own judgment. Now, taking a step back, all of us right here in this room are part of a democracy. We're part of a unified system that cares about our thoughts. But what happens in a world where increasingly we don't have that, and we rather look to the quick and dirty way of just getting the product and not the process? Well, it's not a democracy, ladies and gents, it's a faction. And that's why today I proudly affirm. Thank you.
Before I officially begin my speech, I wanted to start with a few thank yous. So, as Sarisha mentioned, this is her last high school debate. This is also my last high school debate. So, it's a little bit bittersweet, an activity that I've been a part of and very invested in for the last 7 years, to say goodbye. But I'm glad I get to say goodbye under the wings of Air Force One, and I look forward to still engaging in the nuanced discussions the debate has taught me. But with that, I want to thank the Lambert debate team. I don't know if you'll ever watch this, but Varnika, Prajwal, Bobby, Rick, George, all of you guys have been very instrumental. Oh, Vinayak and Brian as well. You guys have been very instrumental in my growth as a person and as a speaker. And without you guys, I don't think I'd be here today. Thank you to the two people that were instrumental in coaching me in debate, John Nahas and Alec Bolton. You guys have helped me in more ways than you'll ever know. And I attribute a lot of what I've learned from debate to you guys. Thank you to Josh Hansen. He's actually a Reagan debate alumni that has judged me both last year and this year at the regionals, and has given me some of the most comprehensive feedback on how to become a great communicator that I've ever seen. He really cares a lot about the Great Communicator debate series, and I really appreciate the feedback he's given me. I've taken it a lot to heart and tried to internalize it as much as possible. Thank you to my best friend Shreen. She's currently going in and out of planes, but she's still keeping up on Tab Room with all of the results, and I can't thank her enough for that, for constantly supporting me good luck and texting me good luck before all of my rounds. Thank you to my mom, who has been there for so long, providing endless support throughout debate tournaments. Even at the regionals, she'd bring me food while I was debating online, and that support, I mean, it'll never be replicated elsewhere. A mother's love is unique. Thank you to my dad, who's with me here today. Every round he watches, even though he really wanted to see Air Force One, he still stuck with me and watched every single round, gave me feedback after every single round, and that's something he's always done for me throughout my debate career and throughout life, and his feedback has been very valuable to me. Thank you to my little brother for also, all of his support. He's one of the kindest souls I know. And to my grandparents, who have, since my birth, been there to nurture my development and to guide me in the right direction to make sure I make the right choices. And finally, thank you to the Reagan Foundation and Miss Adams for hosting such a great tournament. As was mentioned earlier, this is my second year here. It will be my last year here, but I'm grateful for all of the memories that I've had under the wings of Air Force One. With that, if my judges are all ready, and my opponent, all right. When we first became aware of the topic for today's debate, I actually pasted the resolution into ChatGPT, and I got a full 5-minute constructive before I even knew what generative AI was. Now, I didn't use a single word from that constructive, but it provided me a launchpad to expand upon, a direction to take my research. It enabled me to engage with the literature and understand its nuances, which is why I'm proud to argue that generative AI does not pose a threat to individual thought. Now, broadly, I like to articulate 2 critical themes underneath my advocacy today, the first of which involves long-term developments for students. She discusses a lot about how generative AI can be used with deepfakes and to copy other people's information, but this misses a critical element of generative AI: its ability to augment human intelligence. Dr. Zenos from the Baker School of Business finds, quote, "Generative AI tools complement human intelligence, empowering individuals to think more critically and creatively." This fundamentally enhances individual thought for the world's youth in several ways. With regard to diversity, Dr. Seeley of Brown University finds that generative AI, quote, allows individuals to incorporate a diverse range of perspectives, ideas, and information from a variety of sources and cultures, end quote. It promotes a culturally competent style of thinking for young, impressionable students, ensuring our youth develop a multicultural orientation. With regard to analytical problem solving, a study published in Science, one of the world's leading journals, finds that, quote, individuals that effectively use generative AI technologies for decision-making outperform those who do not, end quote. A direct result of generative AI's ability to analyze complex data sets quickly and efficiently. This is especially critical for our country's youth, allowing them to develop critical thinking skills that will be useful in their futures. But the benefits don't stop there. Skill development, creativity, introspective mindsets, productivity boost, knowledge expansion, the list of ways in which generative AI helps youth and helps people broadly is extensive. This reinforces the notion that generative AI does not pose any threat to individual thought. If anything, it enhances it. Now, with youth serving as the future of our country, society must take action to foster their development with generative AI, rather than shackle their individual thinking and suppress their creative tendencies. This is especially true because youth are highly impressionable, which is why Dr. Kalyan finds that, quote, AI-driven educational platforms can significantly improve learning outcomes and retention rates for young people, promoting individual intellectual growth as they age, end quote. In the long run, these generative AI platforms are beneficial for our country's youth. The second theme underneath my position is more broad, regarding benefits generative AI has in promoting individual thoughts in groups with disabilities. For many individuals with disabilities, generative AI is vital to their lives, equipping them with the tools necessary for communication, learning, and creative expression. For people who may lack the faculty to express their individual thoughts, it serves as an empowerment tool, enabling them to articulate their thoughts. This is corroborated by research from Dr. Singhal, Dr. Kumar, Dr. Cho, and Dr. Hovey, all of whom detail, quote, the transformative impact of AI-powered assistive technologies in improving the quality of life and independence for people with disabilities, end quote. More specifically, research from Dr. Miranda finds that, quote, generative AI can enhance communication and creative expression for individuals with disabilities, a phenomenon that is supported by several experimental trials, end quote. This ensures that people with disabilities, especially those that are young, those that feel helpless, those that feel that they have no way to adequately engage with education, are not alone. Rather, they have tools at their disposal that assist them in expressing their thoughts independently. Now, I stand here today in the Ronald Reagan Library under the wings of Air Force One, hoping to embody President Reagan's endless curiosity and unbounded optimism regarding the potential of AI. Quote, there are no great limits to growth because there are no limits of human intelligence, imagination, and wonder, end quote. With a modern tool like generative AI, we can efficiently access the treasure trove of knowledge available at our fingertips, going beyond all limits as we strive for the impossible. Thank you.
This is the affirmative rebuttal. Is everybody ready? All right. That my time will begin now. In the beginning of this debate, I told you that what we are focusing on is, does generative AI determine the confidence to go to our judgment first, to rely as a democracy on our thoughts first, and then a machine's, or a vice versa? Let's talk about my opponent's 2 key points. First, that in students, they augment human intelligence. Well, I don't know if you guys have ever been to a high school, but anytime there's an essay, I assure you that ChatGPT has been used more as a crutch than a tool for learning. But we don't need to just look here as a theoretical, as there's an economic incentive to look for things like generative AI as opposed to hiring. We see this in Los Angeles currently with the theater, and how we've taken screenwriting and creative initiatives and rather replaced them. Rather see artists as a means to an end and thus discard them to the wayside. We see this in the 75% of countries that prefer economic development, that would go to a machine first and then a human. So this idea that it is a beautiful picture that is augmenting human intelligence is simply not true. Because if that was the case, we wouldn't have generative AI competing alongside humans. As even in Colorado State's art fair, Mid-Journey generative AI beat out human competitors, placing first. Is this augmenting independent thought, or is it creating its own narrative? That is the question today. And we can think about this with a simple metaphor. Give any kid you like a chocolate cake, certainly Reagan liked those, and leave the room and tell them not to touch the cake, and you'll come back with a bit of chocolate on their mouth and a bunch of crumbs on the floor. That's because internally, there is an incentive to eat the cake. And for countries, there is an incentive to maximize profit and minimize the people. And I'd like to bring us back to what's Ronald Reagan's specialty: seeing people as people. In his famous speech, Gorbachev, tear down this wall, Ronald Reagan wasn't just talking about tearing down cement. No, he was talking about tearing down a barrier between people to exchange independent thought. And so if you actually look at how these generative AIs will be used in an authoritarian regime, for example, it is not to better the people's lives. No, it is to put out one narrative that has issued the Department of Defense issuing an apology, one narrative where Vladimir Putin is saying that President Zelensky is telling Ukrainians to surrender. This is not, yes, it can have potentially good benefits, but at the end of the day, it is a threat to our independent thought. On the second point of individual thought in helping those with disabilities, there's 2 key arguments here. First, this is not an advent with generative AI. We see technology already helping. Look at Stephen Hawking and the way that he's able to transcend and share his knowledge with others without generative AI. In fact, it actually creates a new impediment. It actually looks at citizens as their parts and not the sum. And that's why right here, right now, when we look at how these generative AI is being influenced, it's more of us being divided than us coming together. And that's why I affirm. Thank you.
Use a little bit of my preparation time. Are my judges ready? And my opponent? Awesome. Ronald Reagan wore many hats in his lifetime, but in his youth, he served as a lifeguard at community pools, believing firmly in the importance of preserving youth life, a principle that I can't emphasize anymore. The future of our country lies in our youth, in their innovative minds and fresh perspectives that enable them to facilitate tangible change in their communities. Generative AI enhances that power, especially for those with disabilities, which is why I'll always be proud to negate. Now, in this speech, I'd like to start by defending my initial advocacy and then move on to addressing some of her key points. The crux of her rebuttal boils down to the idea that we can use generative AI as a way to compete against humans, as a replacement for humans. But there's a couple of problems with this narrative. It looks at the present, the status quo, and not the future and the direction that generative AI will take. With regards to the points about student classrooms and how ChatGPT is used in essays, there's simple solutions for this. For instance, switching essays to paper, like many school districts have already done, to check back against the use of ChatGPT. Or recent technology like GPT-0, mechanisms which have extremely high accuracy rates in detecting whether or not material is artificially generated or not. It's not competing. Especially early on, and when ChatGPT was first released, I'll admit, everyone had their fair share of using the technology as a way to cheat. But as the technology matures, and as mechanisms against this technology and against generative AI are developed and mature even more, it'll be impossible to use this to replace someone entirely. And that's why I say look to the future of generative AI and not the present. I think a great example of this is the technological revolution we saw with the internet. When the internet was first developed, there were a whole lot of concerns with regards to how the internet would play into education and how it would affect other people. Would there be concerns with plagiarism, with art, with people stealing each other's open common licenses? But as the technology matured, and as we developed new mechanisms to counteract this plagiarism, we now see the internet as a boon, as a way to access a plethora of resources that are critical to the youth of our country. And I argue that the same would happen with generative AI. In fact, I'd contend that this process has already begun. She discusses the idea of deepfakes at the top of her initial advocacy. But we're already seeing new technology check back against this. For instance, a preliminary Stanford-based algorithm has found that there is a way to detect whether or not something is a deepfake with 84% accuracy. And that's just the initial phases. This technology hasn't even been around a year. Give it some time, let it mature, and the misinformation that we're seeing initially will smoothen out, leaving us with the benefits of generative AI. On to her first point, which addresses the notion that taking a bunch of aspects of different writing and different pieces of evidence and questioning whether that makes you a writer. And I'll agree with her. That necessarily doesn't make you a writer. But I'd argue that what generative AI uniquely does is it no longer forces students to have to learn things like rote memorization. They no longer have to understand or know how many teaspoons are in a tablespoon, but rather they can use their cognitive resources, their time, and their energy on high-level analysis, which is why Kurtachenko finds from Harvard University that over in a 9-year time span, generative AI leads to a 54% increase in creativity and a 64% increase in critical thinking skills. So no, generative AI doesn't make you a writer, but it makes you a better thinker, more critically, over a long period of time, and that's critical. She discusses the idea of government propaganda second. But the Geneva algorithm produced by the University of Maryland is a great counter against this, which is generative AI being used to fight Chinese propaganda and fight Chinese censorship. This illustrates a key point, that it's the user that's the threat, not generative AI. It depends on how the technology is used, and that's why I'm so proud to negate. Thank you. Ahead of time, since you spoke first, would you like the first question?
Yes, please. All right. Let's start off with the rebuttal of, with things such as deepfakes, there is technology being developed to detect it. What do you say to those citizens in an authoritarian regime, those that are being told one narrative because of the mass propaganda that is being said? How are they supposed to distinguish and have access to these state-of-art technologies that are being built to distinguish right from wrong?
These aren't necessarily complicated machines or state-of-the-art technology. ChatGPT is deployed on the internet software. People in these regimes, for instance in Ukraine, have access to resources like ChatGPT, and similarly will have access to resources when they're past their beta testing phase and are made publicly available, to resources that can help check back against deepfakes. More broadly, I'd argue that when large videos of people, things like government leaders telling their people to surrender or anything like that, these kind of videos will be checked by non-governmental organizations and other governments, which can then steer the media accordingly and inform them that, hey, this is a deep fake based on the analysis that we've conducted of the video. And I think that is a critical power of mass media.
And could I ask a follow-up question?
Certainly.
So if it was the case, do you think that the time frame, though, would be enough to check all the facts and issue the case? Because in the case of the Pentagon burning down, the Department of Defense had to personally come and issue an apology. In the case of Vladimir Putin saying that President Zelensky was calling for the Ukrainians to surrender, Ukrainians were in mass hysteria over this. So do you think the time frame is frankly enough for independent thought to not be threatened?
I do, and here's why. While I'm not going to contest your examples, because I believe they're in the status quo, the technology, as I've proven, is on its way. So, certainly in the first initial stages of generative AI, this isn't something that's absolutely perfect, but perfection shouldn't be the enemy of progress. As we continue to see progress, we'll see preemptive measures taken. For instance, when a picture of the Pentagon is uploaded to the internet, preemptive measures for search engines like Google can be implemented to ensure that no deepfake images will be uploaded, as a great example. Or videos with Vladimir Zelensky. When those videos are circulated to news outlets, preemptive measures are taken that then ensure that, hey, this video is a deepfake, it's not going to be released on mass media platforms so that it doesn't even reach the people in the first place. The deployment of these platforms is critical. It just takes some time to develop them, of course. It's only been less than a year since we've seen the public release of generative AI broadly. I believe that's all of our time in Crossfire.
Hello. We're live. All right. Let's give our debaters a round of applause before we start this session. Great job. And congratulations on making it to the final round. That's just absolutely amazing. And so my question that I'd like both of you to answer, and we'll start with Shrisha, but both of you will answer this question for me. I'd like to know from each of you, what do you think your opponent's best argument is, and why do you think you still win in light of that best argument?
I can start us off. I think that it is a very optimistic view to say that students can augment their creativity with generative AI. And, you know, at the beginning of this debate, I also say this debate is not about whether AI is good or bad, because I think every single one of us in this room recognize that there are positives that AI can be used for. However, I think this debate is a different question. Is where do we place our confidence in judgment in times of crisis? And when we look at that specific scope, because it is in times of crisis, in times like those where democracy, truly the strength of those bonds is shown. And we see that being affected in two key ways, first being the economy, right? We see a clear shift in economic countries and companies rejecting the individual and going to the profit. And because of that shift, we've lost some of our Reagan spirit of seeing people eye to eye, seeing our neighbors not as means to end, seeing artists for the process and not the product. And because of that simple loss, we leave people to the wayside, people that don't know enough about the technology, people that don't have a high school degree, people that want to feel included. But second, and I feel like somewhat ignored in this debate, has been the mass influence that authoritarian regimes have used generative AI for. And yes, it's true, anything you can fact check, but the fact of the matter is, when news is out there, action has to happen. And to say that we can detect deep fakes is commendable, it's great, but if the Department of Defense has to come out and issue an apology, that is a threat to trust in government. That is a threat to trust in our democracy, because how are citizens supposed to feel safe if their nation can't even safeguard what is reality and what is not?
So to answer your question, I think the argument that she just articulated is probably my opponent's strongest point. The idea that in times of crisis, generative AI may pose a threat to individual thought. However, the reason I still think I win this argument is because I'm analyzing the future, forecasting what's going to happen, and looking from a broader scope at this debate. She keeps bringing up the examples of the Pentagon or President Zelensky. And sure, these examples certainly did happen. But they're not looking at what generative AI's potential is going forward. It's, again, the example that I brought up was the internet. If you fast forward, or if you rewinded back to when the internet was first developed and had an argument as to whether or not the internet was a threat to independent thought, or the internet would be a boon to help augment other people, this same debate would be very valid. Fast forward today, and we had that debate, and I think everyone in this room can agree the internet is a treasure trove of resources. Because as we got over the initial hump of this new technology and we needed mechanisms to regulate it, once that regulation happened, we saw prosperity and we saw success with technology like the internet. And I think the critical downfall in my opponent's argument is she's not accounting for recent trends. Recent research, like the Stanford algorithm that can detect deepfakes with high accuracy. The meeting with President Biden literally yesterday morning regarding how companies are meeting to regulate artificial intelligence. These are all recent developments that are occurring in a brand new space. And so, whether or not generative AI poses a threat to individual thought right now isn't the question that I'm framing the debate around. But I'd argue that for the infinitesimal time ahead, moving forward, generative AI will not be a threat to individual thought as we smooth out the issues, just like we've done with the internet.
You both should be very proud. Congratulations, amazing young debaters, and I'm sure your families are very proud of you both. A wise man once said, "Trust but verify." As we all know, that famous quote was from Ronald Reagan. A question I pose to you both, is that really possible with the use of AI? How do you weigh the potential benefits of AI against the perceived risks? And are there any specific areas where benefits outweigh the safety concerns or vice versa? Thank you.
Certainly. You mind if I take this one first?
Yep, go ahead.
So I'd contend that trust but verify is certainly true in this case. You shouldn't trust, just everything you see on the internet. And I think this goes back to the potential deployment of preemptive measures, preemptive algorithms, just like we see with the internet. Again, a common example or a common misconception with the internet when it was first developed was the ability to proliferate misinformation and the ability to take and cheat from other people's information. Fast forward years after the internet has been developed, and we have preemptive measures that stop you from uploading a news article if it's already been written by someone else, so you can no longer plagiarize content. It stops you from stealing other people's work. It creates these safeguards that allow you to verify, and like my opponent says, in times of crisis, it allows you to verify with an immediate time frame. It's preemptive. Before it even reaches the people, we see this solution. So when you pose the question about the benefits and drawbacks of artificial intelligence, I would contend that we're seeing the future of generative AI as one that is prosperous for independent thought, one that allows augmentation and allows prosperity. I'll let her have the instances, the two specific examples of the Pentagon and Zelensky that she can provide, and maybe those were threats to individual thought. But the 10, 50, 100, thousands of years moving forward with generative AI will not have threats to individual thought. And I think that is the advocacy that President Reagan would have wanted us to see. The future of the country is bright.
All right, I'd actually like to answer your question with a story about Ronald Reagan that I actually learned about yesterday. Is that when the Olympians were coming at the White House to meet the president, there was one incident where Ronald Reagan saw an Olympian who he thought was harmed by his security guards. And he actually took the effort to then invite the Olympian back into the Oval Office to commend an apology and to thank that Olympian for his service. Now, why that's important is that it shows that Ronald Reagan cared about every single one of us. That he didn't just look at the world in a utilitarian sense of what is best in 100 years, because he knew that what was best in 100 years can only happen if we care about what's best now for everybody. That he didn't just couple a bunch of people together, but he looked at the individual. So if we look at that, I mean, the amount of misinformation that isn't being safeguarded right now is massive. We see right now there's research being done by NewsGuard analysts that say ChatGPT can generate false narratives on detailed news articles, essays, TV scripts for 80 out of the 100 previously identified false narratives. And to say that in things such as articles where you don't necessarily have authorship, you don't know who wrote it, there's no possible way of fact-checking every single one. And even in a world when you could, it will be too late because you already have an incentive structure where you're looking at people as products and not as the people themselves. And so I think that the claim that you can safeguard every single instance is not realistic. And even one instance, such as the Pentagon, is severe because we want to know that we're protected as Americans. We want to trust the government. And even one instance like that is enough to shatter that trust. And I don't want to take that risk, and neither would Ronald Reagan.
Just press this. On the way over here today, we passed the Sally Ride statue that was dedicated here at the library on July the 4th. Thank you, too, for taking us on one whalable ride this afternoon. You both have been marvelous in your challenge of this debate. You probably have been working hard on prepping for it for the last week, and maybe you haven't had a chance to go to the movies. But it's almost like you've taken us on a motorcycle ride off of a cliff and gone into a free fall and then opened a parachute, trying to see whether you can land safely. All of that, of course, is in the movie that you didn't see in the last week. It's Tom Cruise's new movie. My question to you relates to Mission Impossible. You've got everybody in the room today interested in what you're talking about, and you're interested in what you're talking about. But I suspect that there's a great swath of America where they don't have any interest in this talking about this subject at all. And so my question relates to that. What is that impossible mission of how you get to that vast swath of America that is apathetic, not interested in this content, and how do you get them engaged?
I'd like to answer that.
For sure.
So looking at all of you here today, I know that, as I mentioned before, each one of you here is for a reason. But like all of you, I too have felt at many times insecure or unsure of any position that you are in, whether it's a job position, whether you're a new mother and you don't know if you're right for the job. But I think at the core, we have to make sure that we know that we're right for this democracy, that we're all meant to be here for some reason, and no amount of end results, or no matter how much we produce, that is not what makes us worth it, I think is a really key message, and even relevant to generative AI, right? Because we don't want to shift the paradigm of why we value each one of us in this room today. So I think for those who might be uninterested or apathetic, they might not just see themselves in the shoes of being citizens yet. And we don't want to exacerbate that by, reinforcing messages that machines are the first point of contact rather than the people, that 75% of countries, rather have that economic gain rather than go on us with that infinite journey. And so I think because of all of that, we have to, as citizens, take the step up even when we feel insecure or unsure, and participate in this beautiful democracy that we have today.
I couldn't agree more with my opponent here. I think it's a very crucial narrative that, there's all of you here today that are thankfully listening to what we have to say about this topic, and more watching online. But this is a crucial discussion that needs to involve a much broader forum of people, the everyday citizens that are being impacted by generative AI. But I would contest my opponent on the message that we can send with generative AI. Because generative AI has the power to turn those that are apathetic to this discussion to those that understand the limitless potential. To quote President Reagan, human intelligence was limitless. And now, with generative AI, we can truly unlock its potential. And I'd like to give a few examples of that. In order to be fulfilling, effective citizens, one of our biggest civic responsibilities is to vote. Well, recent evidence from the University of Virginia finds that generative AI increases civic participation by 17%, providing people with the resources they need to engage with their local voting areas and helping them direct them to where they need to be. This is one of the ways in which we're able to see people become more effective citizens of society and find their place as productive members of the United States. I think another critical example is with people's everyday jobs. Understanding how generative artificial intelligence can apply to your specific jobs and how it can augment your existing responsibilities. The example I'll give is a software engineer. A huge field that's in demand right now, generative AI can write and replicate existing code. And that leaves software engineers to spend their time, energy, resources, and cognitive understanding to develop and build upon that code. Rather than replicating what already exists, they can find the unique nuances or the unique machine learning filters or the specific ways to which they can screen drugs to create life-saving treatments for our society, which betters us as a country. I think there's a myriad of ways that generative AI can play into helping people understand how they belong, how generative AI can benefit them, and how, in turn, it makes us a better country, a better citizen, and then more broadly even to the world, how it allows people to be better civilians of society.
Well, I want to say to begin with that I am so impressed by you both that you represent something that I didn't know was following behind us, and that is responsible, thoughtful people that can process information and deliver it in an innovative and instructive way. You have taught me much today, and I thank you both for that. I want to go back and ask you a question, and it's a fundamental question, about when you formulated your positions, affirmative and negative. Do you begin from the point that the nature of man is inherently good and capable of failings and therefore potentially evil? Or do you believe that the nature of man is essentially evil and has to be nurtured towards goodness? Because it's a fundamental question when you take external thought now out of the human mind and you begin to make your decisions based on that. So I pose that question to you both. Thank you.
you mind if I take this one first?
Yes, go ahead.
So I think my approach would be to start that man is inherently, I take more of an optimistic approach, that man is inherently good, and there are evil applications, there are evil ways that they could have some shortcomings. I think a great example of such is with the government propaganda argument that she discusses. I don't think that's a question of generative artificial intelligence or its discussion on how it poses a threat to individual thought, but rather just a question of the user behind it. The Geneva algorithm by the University of Maryland was used in a positive way to fight Chinese propaganda and censorship, whereas China uses AI in a negative way to increase censorship. Examples of the two facets of human nature, but not representative of generative AI holistically. So when I formulated my position, my thinking was that human nature is inherently good. I chose to believe, as I believe President Reagan would as well, that our civilians have a duty, a civic duty, to represent their country in governmental institutions, to serve their families by putting food on the table and earning through their jobs, and things to that effect. And so I found ways in which I believed that generative AI could benefit the good in people. I think that we see those mistakes becoming those people that become evil when they don't have pathways to success or when they don't have pathways to achieving their goals. And so I found ways in which I believe generative AI would allow people to execute that. A good instance of such is the augmentation I mentioned with software programmers earlier, making their jobs so that they're able to facilitate better innovation, and as a result, contribute better to society. Ideas like this are what enable me to postulate that generative artificial intelligence would be a net benefit for our country and help our civilians take their inherently optimistic and, quote, good mindsets and further them, rather than falling along the path to something that may be more nefarious in nature, something that may be considered evil. And I think that that is the advocacy that I stand by, and I think that generative AI can augment those great, the inherent good in the people of our society, and broadly, the people of the world.
All right. Well, I would say that in the most respect for humans possible, I believe in original sin. And I would say that man is inherently evil, but that makes our duty to serve one another all the more important. Now, me and my opponent have talked a lot about the applications of AI, and I do not doubt that AI can be used in positive ways. But this innovation is different. It is a literal creation of something new. And it is not just something that is augmenting us, but rather it is crafting a narrative. And we ought to be really careful of what type of narrative we are crafting when put in positions of power. When we have an incentive, a chocolate cake in front of us, do we take the easy way out? Unfortunately, we have. We have placed our trust in machines over humans, and I'd like to say that that's because it's not within our nature, but obviously we are all self-preserving. And that's what each one of you today, I'd like you to consider, do we want to take the extra step to serve today? To see each other and recognize that there can be positives, but fundamentally want to preserve independent thought. To know that our confidence right now is jeopardized when we consistently reject those in the screenwriting room because they weren't fast enough with the script. When we consistently reject those in the music industry because they didn't do much to help with the profit. If we can see each other eye to eye, as I know that President Reagan has and would continue to do today, if we choose to tear down that wall that's in front of us and make sure that any threat to independent thought that we have today does not exist.
Thank you, and congratulations to both of you. This is you've left us judges with what will be a very, very difficult decision at the end of this debate. So again, congratulations. AI, I think, is perhaps one of the biggest issues that we face today, and so I want to ask a big picture question today. And so the first question will be for Mr. Sood. what is the ultimate potential for AI in the progress of the human race? And does that potential inform the decisions that we need to make today on that? And then on the alternative, for Ms. Raj, what is the ultimate threat that AI poses in the progress of the human race? And does that risk inform the decisions that we need to make today on this issue? Mr. Stu.
Of course. So I believe that AI poses a boon in the future. As I've articulated earlier in this debate, mechanisms are coming up as of recent to check back against the issues that she articulates with generative artificial intelligence. Just yesterday, President Biden had a meeting with top AI companies and enshrining legislative priorities that he wants to do and to prioritize an executive order to implement those in the legislature. Representative Ted Lieu has begun a bipartisan task force to initiate legislation for a bill that is being written as we speak, as of June 21st, 2023. I think that illustrates that the threat that generative AI may pose will no longer exist as mankind continues to progress. Instead, we'll see an augmentation of the potential that humanity holds. I gave the instance of a software engineer earlier. I'd like to give a different example of a scientific researcher now. Currently, scientific research is somewhat limited, especially with regards to therapeutics, because we're not able to effectively use things like tools like generative AI, which hinder our progress, hinder our ability to look at wide swaths of data and of images and of drugs and things to that effect. But when we're able to bring generative AI into the equation, it reproduces existing methods and existing softwares that are then able to analyze and spit out a bunch of numbers, essentially, as to the interactions between specific compounds. And then humans are able to reserve their cognitive resources, not focusing on, doing the actual reproducible part of what exists in terms of analyzing these drugs, but then taking the results and interpreting them in a way that's meaningful to create therapeutics for life-saving treatments. A great example of this is what Moderna has done with the COVID-19 vaccine, using generative AI on the back end as a way to scan multiple different mRNA sequences and, in a rapid manner, determine which mRNA targets would be the best to inhibit the activity of SARS-CoV-2. I think that illustrates, and the proof is in the pudding there, illustrating how generative AI has the potential to help humanity in tangible effects. And I think that the threat that she discusses is one that exists with any sort of new technology or any sort of new phenomenon. There is always a rough patch in the beginning, but as technology matures against it to regulate it effectively from a legislative and from a market perspective, we'll see the technology smooth out just as we did with the internet and see a boon for society.
All right. So I'd like to discuss more on this rough patch that my opponent brings up. You see, I wouldn't glide past it as fast as that, because if a rough patch means that the government is not in control of the narratives that they're saying to the people, if the people can't fully trust that we even know what we're seeing, then that rough patch is our whole country. You see, I like to think of risk as something that we play around kind of like with fire, we shouldn't just glide past it because, frankly, even with, let's say there's the meeting yesterday with Biden, President Biden and the AI companies don't know what to do. As much as they have meetings and legislation, even the founders of ChatGPT and such generative AI do not know how do we regulate this sort of technology, and that's the fact of the matter. No matter how much safeguarding you put up, how quick are we going to take action before fear comes into our hearts? Because I would say that no matter what the speed is, it is not a risk worth taking. Because the trust and lives of the American people is not something to just be played with, to be swindled with, to kind of coddle with in terms of all these technological advancements. The fact of the matter is we don't know. Now, the question is, do we have the confidence to participate in our democracy, to reclaim the position, to fight back and say, no, I am not the sum of my parts. I am a whole. And tangibly what this looks like is in the extreme scenario when there isn't democracy. And again, I'd like to really emphasize that things like the Chinese Communist Party is keen on molding public opinion at scales unprecedented. This is not the internet. This is crafting a new narrative based on what those in power want it to say. This is not compiling our own resources with the skepticism that America so fondly remembers. This is one narrative and no objection. So to say that we can just identify what is false is not good enough if, as we as Americans don't know if we can even trust what's being put in front of us. And the fact of the matter is, I'm not an expert in AI. And I don't know how many of you in the crowd are, but the day-to-day interactions that we do have shouldn't be in somebody else's hands. It should be in our hands as a democracy to know that we can protect and prevail.
Is this live? Yeah. So I'll join the other judges in saying the two of you have given us the hardest job possible by performing so well that it is unbelievably difficult really to think about ranking because you're both amazing. So thank you for the incredible performance. I'd like to explore a little bit more the role of regulation and the role of the government or other agencies with respect to AI. Knowing President Reagan's feelings about regulation from the federal government and sitting under the tail of his 707, I get a little bit uneasy. I don't want anything falling on my head for doing anything, saying anything that would be offensive to President Reagan about the role of the federal government. Mr. Sood, I have different questions for both of you about regulation. Mr. Sood, I'm struggling to reconcile one piece of your position, and so I'd like you to amplify it and illuminate it a little bit. We all know tons of government and industry focus on trying to develop some sort of solution to constrain AI and to protect the public. You've made the statement that you do not think that AI is a threat to independent thought, but then sort of also have said that some regulation and action naturally needs to follow so that we end up in a good place in the future. What I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about is what exactly do you see that process being? What is the regulatory framework that needs to occur for your argument to prove correct, which is that AI will develop into something that is beneficial and that is not a threat, to independent individual thought? Ms. Raj, a parallel question for you, and you guys can take this in whichever order you would like. Is there a level of government regulation that would satisfy you that AI is not going to be a threat? What action would you take? Or if you were the ultimate regulator, is your position it needs to be completely shut down, completely? What action would you actually take if you were in that regulatory position? Thanks.
Sure. I believe I took the last question first, so would you like this one?
Sure. So the fact of the matter is, I think we've let the genie out of the bottle. And like President Ronald Reagan, I also believe that the state is not the ultimate, force. It's not going to be a force of good, but rather limiting the state is how freedom of speech and the other liberties that we have prevail. Now, that being said, I think that it is going to be very hard for things like authoritarian regimes to then be able to backtrack or for us to meaningfully regulate this technology, because already we see that they're trying to mass mold a narrative and stop independent thinking. And also, it's very hard because this now deals with the private sector. We see in emerging countries with focus on economic development, such as India and Brazil, are already kind of leaving to the wayside human potential because they want a more quick and efficient approach. So in a way, I do see the positives of AI. I can see that people can use it as a force for good. But when we're talking about generative AI, I think it's too far gone where we are sticking to one narrative and the genie is out of the bottle. Now it's time to just address that there is a problem.
I think the critical place where I delineate from my opponent is the fact that that problem is being solved as we speak. And I think that's never addressed in the response that she brought up. There's a lot of great rhetoric about the genie in the bottle, but there's no tangible action that she details or a proper response as to what level of regulation is needed. So I'd like to discuss some of the specifics being discussed right now in regards to what regulatory framework I believe should be possible. The meeting yesterday with President Biden and the top companies has outlined specific frameworks and specific details that they want to regulate. It's not how my opponent says that they don't know what to regulate. They do. A great example, and one that I know off the top of my head, is with regards to generative art. Generative art that is produced by AI, one of the regulation states, would have to be watermarked to ensure that there's no fraud as a result. A watermark that can't be removed. A very simple addition, not one that's terribly complicated to think about, but one that solves the issue of plagiarism altogether. When you combine these legislative regulatory frameworks, combined with the technology that exists to check back against plagiarism and cheating from things like GPT, we're seeing solvency as we speak. And I think what's critical to understand is her main point of advocacy and her main point of contention is that there needs to be trust in the government. If the government is regulating something like ChatGPT or generative AI broadly, that reinstates trust. The government, like she says, now has control in their hands. The narrative is in their hands, and they are able to adequately control what we're able to use generative AI for, crowding out some of the negatives that she discusses. I think that's especially crucial because this regulatory framework is what's going to allow us to see the augmentation and the boons of generative AI, just again, as it did with the internet. When we initially started, there were rough patches, there were concerns, and there were problems. But as we regulated it over time, and as the government stepped in, without having too much of a heavy hand, of course, akin to President Reagan, but they were still able to step in, still able to create rules as to what these companies can do, and ultimately, that led to the internet booming. And I think the same is true for generative artificial intelligence. The proof is in the pudding right now.
Could I respond to that very quickly? I think one point to focus on is that the solution involves the state controlling the narrative. Regardless of what it might be, the state is still in power of the narrative if we attempt any sort of regulative framework. And that phrase itself should tell you where daily citizens are in the command control, the chain of command of generative AI, where they are in positions of power and autonomy in this nation. And I just like every single one of you to keep that in mind for the rest of today's debate.
Well, thanks to you both for an excellent debate so far. I have separate questions that I'll ask for each of you. Ms. Raj, I'll start with you. Mr. Sood gave us the example of the creation and popularization of the internet as a relevant historical analog to the challenges and opportunities we're seeing with AI. I wonder if you think that's the best example, or if there's another technological advancement in history, whether it's recent or long ago, that's more similar or to what we're seeing with AI today, and what lessons we can learn from whatever you think the best example is in terms of how they approach that technology then.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that this is quite an invention because it's been there for a long time, but I think that the best way we can look at generative AI is propaganda. And stuff like the internet, the key difference here is that as consumers, as citizens, we have the free will to choose and fact check and look at different sources and see where they're from on the internet. Whereas with generative AI, it gives us some of this vague echo chamber, almost, where it has actually been shown, as I've stated before, that you can manipulate and manufacture things like ChatGPT to produce a certain narrative, to make that pop up more frequently than others. And I think that's important because the exposure that we have is completely different. And if we are going to revert to a place where one narrative prevails, my fellow Americans, that's not democracy. That's an authoritarian regime. And regardless of how many positive examples you can give of augmenting creativity in this, that does not acknowledge the fact that there is another side to this coin. That when we break down this wall, there's another side that we ought to look at. And so I don't think that the internet is a sufficient example because, like I mentioned before, the people are not in control. It becomes something that represents not a democracy, and that's not what we value today.
Thanks. And then Mr. Sood, similarly, but on a different point, I'd like to ask you to respond to something that Ms. Raj brought up, which is her point on authoritarian countries and the dangers and perils of AI, generative AI, particularly in those societies. Your argument has rested largely on the nature of our free, open, democratic, dynamic system. And so I wonder what you see the future of AI, generative AI in authoritarian countries is, and if you think even there it won't be a threat to independent thought.
So I'd argue that there's two levels to this. I'd first contend that I don't think the point is relevant largely to today's debate, because I don't think that's a great example of generative AI and its specific implications. I think that's an example of the user being a threat to independent thought. And I think a great counterexample to her point about Chinese propaganda is the Geneva artificial AI produced by the University of Maryland. This generative AI, what it does is it empowers those in authoritarian nations to fight back against Chinese censorship and Chinese propaganda, illustrating that generative AI at the same time can somehow fight propaganda and be a part of propaganda. So does it pose a threat to individual thought or does it not? I'd argue that that's not even the question. The question is just that generative AI could be used in either way, but with regards to government propaganda and with regards to censorship, it specifically rests on which hands of the user it's in. So I think that that question largely shouldn't be considered in today's debate. It's not relevant to the resolution. But if we were to take her at her highest ground and at face value, I'd argue that a lot of the regulation that would solve back for this. So a specific article I want to cite is the author Stevens from Forbes that finds that a lot of innovation that China is doing with their generative artificial intelligence to spread propaganda is used primarily and based primarily on United States-based systems. Now that's key because the framework and the framework that was set out by President Biden yesterday has articulated that these US companies would then have to scale back on how much they're proliferating this technology internationally, and especially with authoritarian regimes that are reverse engineering the same technology that we're using. It's based on the technology that are produced by US firms. So I'd argue that if we're still able to see regulation, we'd solve back for the issues that she discusses in these authoritarian nations if we're to consider this even part of the debate. But I'd say that generative AI is just the instrument here, and there's no relevance as to whether or not it poses a threat to independent thought or not. It just depends on who's controlling it, and that's outside of the scope of the discussion that we're having today. I believe that's all of our questioning.
Thank you, guys.
Another round of applause for our debaters. Great job. I think now our judges are going to deliberate and then hand in their ballots individually when they're ready. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We have more speeches, so stay tuned.
right. And now, for my last speech ever, is everybody ready? Then my time begins now. Everyone in this room today knew the kind of man that President Ronald Reagan was. I'd like to return back to him to think about what he instilled in our country today. The foundations of democracy, the foundations of looking at one another eye to eye as continual processes and not products. The initiative to value every single individual's life and to call for arms and to say and take a stand when something isn't right. In today's debate, you've heard a lot of positive applications of generative AI. However, I'd like to leave you off with one simple phrase. What are we generating? Are we generating with humans in the loop, or are we generating one single homogeneous narrative? I say that with the liberties that we have today in freedom of speech, because of things such as original sin, we ought to use it to serve one another, to take the extra step and to recognize that there will be powers, bad actors and not, and that's the reality of the day-to-day. Is that things and places such as Russia and China are already looking to mold public opinion. And even outside of that, in our democracy today, countries are going to machines first rather than humans. Now, I don't know about you, but I always like to have a say in decisions that concern me. And as you fellow citizens, I think you guys would like the same. In decisions such as misinformation, in talking about surrendering with President Zelensky in the Ukrainian war, in decisions such as the Pentagon being burned down, do not accept that these are isolated incidents, because one incident is enough to break the integrity of the United States of America. And frankly, when we look at us as a whole, we don't want our sentiments to devolve into leaning on generative AI as the means to get to places. We don't want to, like my brother, sorry Jitesh, to think that we are artists simply because we've inputted a couple of words, as really the pain of art comes with our own emotions first. And so finally, I'd like to leave you with this. If even an ounce of you thinks that independent thought will be threatened, that we won't be able to speak to each other eye to eye, then for the last time, I encourage you to tear down that wall, Mr. Gorbachev, because this is the United States of America, and we want to be a democracy, together in it all. Thank you.
truly a bittersweet moment for us both. And so, for the final time in my debate career as well, are my judges ready? And my opponent? All right. April 2nd, 2005. Wait, nope, wrong important date, sorry. That's my birthday. Here we go. November 30th, 2022. The day generative AI was placed in the hands of consumers for the first time. The day the youth of our society were empowered with tools to facilitate their development. And as proud citizens of a nation which prides ourselves on equality, we have a responsibility to continue this trend. Because when she says that President Reagan would value every individual life, I couldn't agree more. But I'd argue that the benefits of generative AI helps every individual. President Reagan wouldn't back off from a piece of technology after it's only implemented for less than a year, but rather, he'd want to help the future of our country, help the youth prosper, and look to evidence in terms of the studies. And that's why I believe President Reagan would also be in favor of generative artificial intelligence. Now, the crux of her argument boils down to there's, quote, one narrative. But notice how she doesn't address the issue of the budding regulation and the budding mechanisms that exist now to check back on generative AI. We saw the meeting with Biden yesterday outline clear regulatory frameworks and Biden pursuing an executive order to execute them. We see bipartisan task force and legislation being written, led by Representative Ted Lieu, as a way to solve the issue. And we are seeing technology that can fight against deepfakes and fight against AI-generated information with high accuracy rates. The technology is maturing. There's not going to be one narrative. There are going to be a litany of narratives where citizens have the power in their hands because it's regulated. As the government continues to regulate, again, an issue that she fails to address, the integrity and trust that she so dearly values is built. When we are able to develop technologies that preemptively stop misinformation from being proliferated before it even reaches media outlets or before it's even uploaded, that creates trust in our government, that the information that we're seeing is legitimate and valid, and that trust only happens with regulation. So I don't want you to be fooled by the pretty rhetoric or the references to Mr. Gorbachev tearing down this wall. At the end of the day, if you believe that her case is a larger priority than hundreds of years of creativity to come as a result of generative AI, millions and millions of people benefited, then certainly vote affirmative. But I'd argue for the continual benefit of our people and putting the citizens of our country and our world first, which I believe President Reagan would agree with. And the proof is in the pudding. Never addressed by my opponent is the Kurchatenko study from Harvard, which finds that over a 9-year duration, generative AI increased creativity 54% and critical thinking 64%. It doesn't make you a writer, it doesn't make you an artist, but it removes the ability to need rote memorization of straight facts, and instead allows people to free up their time, energy, and cognitive resources to complex analysis, enabling them to be better thinkers in the long run, better innovators for our future, and facilitating tangible change. Insofar as we'll see multiple narratives and trust reinstated that we're seeing happen right now, I strongly urge a ballot in favor of the negation. Thank you.
Wow, congratulations, both of you. America's best days may yet be ahead. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah, all right. So, please, debaters, congratulations again. This was so powerful. I kept changing my mind. And feel free to take a moment, take a breath, gather your stuff, head back to your seats in the audience for a moment while our judges are finishing their remarks and casting their ballots and making this very challenging decision. Now, I want to invite those of you with a smartphone to help us cast the audience vote. So please refer to our screen. There is a a QR code that connects to Mentimeter. And for those of you watching live, you may also join in casting your vote. And the voting information should show up on the screen momentarily. Oh, it's already there. And go ahead and open up your camera on their phone and scan the QR code on the screen. If you are a member of our education team, please raise your hand. Okay, see those people raising their hand? They can give you assistance as well. And also, all our debaters over here have already pretty much finished the task, so they know what they're doing as well. Remember, Shrisha Raj was the affirmative and was sitting on the left-hand side of the stage, and Sahil Sood was the negative and was sitting on the right-hand side of the stage. All right, judges, good luck. I'm going to give our debaters a moment to finish up their judging before I invite them to the stage.
What'd you think? Huh? It's done. It was good. Gives you faith in young people, doesn't it? Really?
They took your ballot.
All right, before we announce who is the national champion, and as they tally up the votes here, I'd like to recognize all of our 2023 national finalists from across the country, and I will invite our final round judges to join us on stage to present the awards. Debaters, When you hear your name, please make your way up to the stage to get your award from Megan Gately. She'll be on my right or your left, and join the judges on stage for a quick photo. So please, judges, if you wouldn't mind. Making your way up the stage. Thank you, Rachel. Megan, if you wouldn't mind joining us as well. All right, so tonight we are privileged to acknowledge distinguished national finalists. So each of these exceptional individuals have earned a scholarship of $1,500, making their remarkable achievements and paving the way for future academic pursuits. We will start with Caden Carr, a dynamic and ambitious rising, yes, give him clapping, senior. At Rock Hill High School near Dallas, Texas, Caden has noted his passion that transcends the traditional classroom setting, and he is eager to delve into the depths of political science and international relations upon graduation. Caden's dedication to the art of debate is unmistakable, evident in his thrilling performances during elimination rounds at the prestigious National Speech and Debate Association National Tournament in Public Forum, as well as his strong showing as a finalist at Texas University's Interscholastic League State Policy Debate Tournament. When it comes to debate, Caden doesn't just participate, he embraces the experience. One more round of applause, please. All right, thank you. Our next finalist is Kyle Lederer. More applause. Kyle recently graduated from Plano West Senior High School, also near Dallas, Texas. This coming fall, Kyle will embark on an exciting new journey at the University of Texas at Austin. His academic talents will be tested as he undertakes an ambitious double major in government and the esteemed Plan 2 honors program. Over the past 4 years, he has been an active figure in the realm of speech and debate, honing his skills and leaving a trail of accomplishments in his wake. Kyle was this year's National Speech and Debate Association's national champion in U.S. extemporaneous speaking and has the distinction of being a 2-time Texas Forensic Association state champion in U.S. extemporaneous speaking. Well done, Kyle. Great. Let me introduce you to Mason Renner. Mason is a rising junior hailing from the heartland of America, Kansas City, Missouri. Within his first 2 years at Rockhurst High, Mason's resume is already adorned with a plethora of impressive accomplishments. He has twice reached the status of a National Speech and Debate Association Congressional Debate House quarterfinalist, showcasing his formidable oratorical and people skills. Moreover, his exceptional talent in the realm of debate led to his crowning as the 2022-2023 KC Parliamentary Debate City Champion. Mason's future is indeed bright. One more round. Next up, Solomon Narayan. Solomon is a vibrant, rising junior at Rockhurst High School in Kansas City, Missouri. A qualifier from our Midwest regional competition, Solomon and his teammate closed out the final round as the champion and runner-up. Having just completed his sophomore year, his skill and dedication to speech and debate have already earned him the highest student degree possible in the National Speech and Debate Association, the Premier Distinction Seal. Great job, Solomon. Now we have Anna Brudico. Meet Anna, a rising senior at the Chadwick School in Los Angeles. Anna's passion for menstrual equity is not just theoretical, she has turned her passion into action. She pioneered an initiative ensuring free menstrual product access for all her school students, truly embodying the spirit of advocacy and inclusivity. But Anna's talents extend beyond social activism. A gifted artist, Anna has been recognized with a prestigious Silver Key and an honorable mention in the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. Her artwork has not only earned critical acclaim, but also enjoyed public display with her stunning pieces gracing the Torrance Cultural Arts Foundation Festival in June. Congratulations, Anna. Our next recipient is Joseph Lin, born and raised in New York. Yes, keep clapping, keep clapping. Joseph graduated from his home school this spring and is headed to Regent University, where his creative inclinations have resulted in his pursuit of a degree in film and television production. Joseph's talents are not confined to the realm of the arts, as he has carved a distinguished path in the world of debate, specifically within the National Christian Forensics and Communications Association Debate League. Over the past 4 years, Joseph has ascended the ranks, earning the coveted title of the best speaker in the Northeast region this year. On the national stage, he emerged as the 7th best speaker. In addition, Joseph and his partner claimed the regional championship in team policy debate in 2022. Congratulations, Joseph. Next up, we have Ting Han Wang. Ting is a rising senior at Acton-Boxborough Regional High School in Massachusetts. Ting's career aspiration is to delve into the world of law, a natural progression for someone who embodies the spirit of debate. Ting also channels her leadership and communication skills into serving, not only as her speech and debates team's captain, but also by giving back to her community. She serves as a volunteer at local schools, harnessing her talent for discourse and persuasion to make a difference. Ting's commitment to education resulted in her founding an impactful nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering learning in her community. In Ting, we witnessed the fusion of compassionate heart, a brilliant mind, and a promising future legal luminary. Congratulations, Ting. Our last national finalist is Lucas Kasukos. Lucas, I need more applause on that, thank you. Lucas graduated from Wilton High School in Connecticut, where his academic gifts and hard work earned him the title of valedictorian of his senior year class. Lucas is set to attend Yale University, where he plans to dual major in political science and the classics this upcoming year. A proud first-generation American, Lucas's remarkable achievements have not gone unnoticed. He was bestowed with the prestigious U.S. Presidential Scholar designation this year, and he was further recognized as a National Merit Scholarship finalist. Lucas's drive, integrity, and citizenry were also acknowledged with our own distinguished Reagan Leadership Medal, a tribute to high school seniors who embody the qualities that President Reagan exemplified. Thank you. Congratulations. So now we turn our attention to our exceptional quarterfinalists. Each of these talented individuals have proved their determination in the competition and will be granted a $2,500 scholarship to aid in their academic journey. So first, we have Amari Liu. Amari is a rising senior from Pine Creek High School in Colorado. Amari has his sights set on studying political science and international relations. His intellectual pursuits, however, extend beyond academia. As well as being a formidable force in debate, Amari is a multi-talented individual who founded his own nonprofit organization to provide free SAT tutoring to students in his community. He brings his leadership skills to his high school, serving as the president of both the Speech and Debate Club and the Social Studies Honor Society. Additionally, Amari actively contributes to Future Business Leaders of America and Future Health Professionals, further showcasing his diverse range of interests and commitment to shaping a better future. Way to go, Amari. All right, next up is Elise Rogers. Elise is a rising senior at Classical Conversations. With aspirations to transition into the medical field post-graduation, Elise is not only academically driven, but also keenly involved in debate. She has demonstrated her eloquence and quick thinking at numerous local debate tournaments in Springfield, Missouri, and soared to national recognition in both international extemporaneous speaking and extemporaneous commentary. Beyond her academic and debate achievements, Elise's commitment to the community shines through her active volunteerism. In addition, her artistic skill has been acknowledged and celebrated with numerous awards in local art and essay contests. Well done, Elise. Our third quarterfinalist is Samuel Ma. A distinguished alumnus of United Christian Academy in Southern California, Samuel begins his studies at the University of California, Irvine this fall, with plans to double major in political science and psychology. His impressive speech and debate skills helped him rank in the top 1% of high school mock trial attorneys in California. He also won the prestigious Coaches Award for mock trial twice during his high school years. In addition to his public speaking talents, Samuel also commands technical prowess, as demonstrated by his reign as the Microsoft Office PowerPoint 2016 champion in the state of California. Samuel, the world will benefit greatly from your many talents. Thank you. And lastly, we have Luke Brooker. Luke is from New Waverly, Texas, and qualified at our online Pacific Northwest competition. A proud student of Personalized Homeschooling Journey, Luke has navigated the academic waters, graduated this spring. His intellectual curiosity has propelled him to explore an intriguing triad of studies at Dallas Baptist University: politics, philosophy, and economics, laying the groundwork for his eventual career as, you guessed it, an attorney. Luke demonstrated his oratorical skills by securing the 2023 National Christian Forensics and Communication Association's National Championship in both impromptu and extemporaneous speaking. Great job, Luke. We will now introduce our esteemed semifinalists, each of whom have obtained a significant scholarship of $5,250. That's a very odd amount, I know. But these stellar individuals have not only ascended to this prestigious stage of competition, they've also secured a substantial contribution towards their academic endeavors. So our first recipient is Ephraim Bowling. Ephraim hails from the vibrant city of Oklahoma City. As Ephraim transitions to his junior year at Mount St. Mary Catholic High School, he graciously steps up to the role of junior class vice president, bringing grace, confidence, and leadership to the position. Ephraim's oratory skills are exceptional, as his Oklahoma State Championship in domestic extemporaneous speaking attests. His speaking talent didn't stop at Oklahoma's borders. He recently competed at the prestigious National Speech and Debate Association's national tournament this past June in Phoenix. Great job, Ephraim. And our second recipient is Zachary Stoyer. Zachary is a debate enthusiast, a future political scientist, and an academic achiever hailing from Stuart Manor, New York. Zachary recently graduated from Chaminade High School, and he looks forward to beginning his collegiate journey at Providence College with a focus on political science. His expertise in the realm of speech and debate is well established, as Zachary has not only reached the octofinals in Lincoln Douglas debate at the highly competitive National Catholic Forensic League National Tournament, but also claimed the 15th spot as the speaker from hundreds in his event at the National Speech and Debate Association Tournament. Congratulations, Zachary. All right, and now, this is the moment we've all been waiting for, naming our national runner-up and our national champion in 2023's Great Communicator Debate Series. Receiving a $7,500 scholarship on a 5-3 vote, our 2023 runner-up is Shrisha Raj. All right, let's give her one more round of applause. And that means our 2023 Great Communicator National Champion receiving a $10,000 scholarship is Sahil Sood. Come up to the stage, the 2023 Next Great Communicator. All right, yeah, let's keep going. Thank you all for supporting this competition, and honestly, congratulations to each of our debaters this evening. We invite you now to join us at dinner below. Debaters, chaperones, alumni, VIPs, final round judges, and guests, please make your way to the table to my left, your right, to pick up your table assignment cards. And I'd now like to ask all of our national finalists to gather next to the stage for a group photo, right? Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the evening. Please head down the stairs behind you and find your open table.